Rhonda. Good to see so many people here joining me for lunch. And I just really appreciate all of your prayers and support as we're traveling the last couple, 2.5 weeks. I'm going to go and switch over screens here to share pictures and videos from the field. All right, so you should be able to see the first slide here. So as Rhonda mentioned, this is a special edition from the front lines of Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Zambia, where we just returned on Monday from about 2.5 weeks going through these countries. So in this part of Africa is where we concentrated. We were essentially trying to cram in 9 months worth of travel into a couple weeks because of COVID and all of the challenges that COVID has presented for the world and for international travel especially. But this was a great opportunity, and we had a wonderful team of people that went with me and worked for specific purposes on the mission that we had in front of us. Shown is on the left is Hugo. So Hugo Vanderwalt is our Malawi Field Engineering Director, and he and his wife Bree will be moving to Malawi starting the middle of next year. And then on the right is our quality engineer, Ray Ehrig. And so Ray and Hugo, and then there was David Anderson and myself. And we had been working towards visiting our field partners and setting up the field office, and each person brought different skills to the table here. One of the many challenges that we faced for international travel was, of course, COVID. And we presented these papers many times. In fact, our team each had to be tested twice before we even left the United States. And there were a lot of uncertainties. There was a lot of questions about what the regulations were entering countries, which seemed to vary significantly between who you talked to. So we probably spent 20 or 30 hours of research before the trip trying to make sure that we're meeting the requirements, that we wouldn't be denied entry or go into a mandatory quarantine in some other country. And we were calling embassies, calling consulates, talking to missionaries, NGOs, reading websites, and everything was fairly inconsistent, which didn't give us a lot of confidence. But we knew that this mission was something that was very important, and we felt God was calling us to go. And so about a week before the trip, I had a meeting with our team and basically said, if nobody's going to blame you if you back out at this point, because there's so much uncertainty, and we may be spending Christmas in Africa somewhere. And if you wanna back out, now's the time. And of course, everybody said nope, we're still in. And God just really blessed our time. So thankfully, we remained COVID-free, and we didn't. One of our big concerns was not only catching COVID but spreading it. And so we were very, very careful about that, and we were able to get through all the border crossings necessary. Now, we did have several flight issues and cancellations due to COVID-related travel craziness, but the Lord got us where we needed to be. The first country I want to share about is Zimbabwe. So we started working in Zimbabwe about 2 years ago through the Karanda Mission Hospital, which is in the northeast corner of the country in a very remote area. This is our team. So once again, we have Ray on the left, we have Hugo in the center, and David Anderson on the right. And we arrived, this is our first stop after a long journey. In this part of the world, it's been very dry. And in fact, this is a scene just outside of the hospital. The hospital is considered one of the top hospitals in the country. It's considered like the Mayo Clinic of Zimbabwe, but yet they are drastically lacking supplies and personnel to meet all the needs. And one of the major issues is water. So water at the hospital is scarce. And in fact, because there's been a drought and we're at the end of the dry season, the river in which the hospital depends on to pump water to treat and use for the hospital was not available. And so they were in extreme water rationing mode, which means that they were using about 1/5 of the amount of water that they normally use. So needless to say, we didn't take a lot of hot showers, but nevertheless, it worked out fine, and they were able to get enough water for drinking from the few wells they have around there. But this gives you an idea of the landscape and the people and just how dry this place is. So John Christensen is one of the missionaries stationed at the Corona Mission Hospital. He's in the red. He grew up as a missionary kid. He and his wife moved back about 15, 20 years ago. And he heads up the maintenance of the hospital and the equipment, as well as the water supply for the hospital. And so knowing that there was such a strain on the water supply at the hospital, they also realized there was a very big strain on the surrounding communities. And that's when we got in touch together, and he started learning about life pumps and wanted to use life pumps because the pumps they're using, commonly used in Zimbabwe, are called the bush pump, and they have a lot of maintenance issues. And that's something that's just constantly plaguing organizations like the Corona Mission Hospital, is maintaining parts that are not available locally. As part of the work we're doing is setting up the local supply chain. So this is very critical for long-term sustainability. And in fact, this is a 20-foot container that is acting as the storage for all life pump parts and tools. And so this is a dedicated storage that then creates, it's a central hub for the 14 life pumps that are currently surrounding the hospital. And we have 19 more that are heading there in January. So the number and the impact is growing, and it's really important that we have local parts and skilled labor in country. And that's been a great partnership we've had with the Mission Hospital because of this. Just inside the gate of the hospital, where buses are dropping people off, and people literally walk days to get to the hospital because there's just such a lack of medical care in the country. There's a water pump just inside the gate, and this is the one that a lot of people are using as they're waiting to be admitted to the hospital to get into the gate. And sometimes people camp for days outside, waiting their turn or waiting for family members. And you can see how the water even provides life for these animals, these goats that are eating on a little bit of grass and drinking the water from the runoff. And if we were to look at the usage, which we installed several light pump links on our trip and trained on how to install several more, we saw just a couple days ago, this pump was used about 4 hours. It ranges from 4 to 6 hours. And this always depends on a number of factors, such as if it's raining, if the water is being used just for drinking and cooking, or if it's also used for other purposes like gardening or bathing in this case. At the well, you run into a lot of really interesting people. And in fact, one of those is a gentleman here on the left named Nesbitt. And he and his sister have been at the hospital for about a month. His sister is admitted, and he's there simply as support and comfort for her. And so, you know, we learned his story, and we prayed with him. It's just a really great way to reach out and see how the hospital is meeting the physical needs of people, but also the spiritual needs. And John is just such a great example of doing that in action. And so it's a wonderful relationship to be able to work with partners like John and the team there. One of the team members is this guy. His name is Washington. He's a local Zimbabwean who works at the hospital and lives in one of the communities surrounding it. And Washington, his nickname is Washi, which is appropriate because in the water world, we have the acronym WASH, which stands for Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene. And so Washi is made for this job. Washi is learning how to install the light pump links. He is the guy that installed the majority of the pumps around the community. John and his philosophy, which is really great, is really empowering the locals and training the locals. These pumps were installed just last June and July during the peak of the pandemic, and were the first pumps that were installed without a design outreach person present. And that really was a big milestone and a big tribute to the installation materials that we have, the installation manual and the short videos that we now have that are able to train people remotely so that they're able to put in the pumps without depending on international travel. One of those pumps is this one as well. This is called the Business Center. So just outside the gate, this is kind of a commerce area that there's several little shops and people are using the water pump. You can see the kids pumping here. And this pump is used, once again, ranging from 13 to 7 hours or so. And a lot of this depends on, just like I mentioned before, the usage. And it's very interesting when we look at the data, the patterns, and we can overlay weather patterns. We can overlay, even holidays and so forth to know when there's going to be peak. And the goal is to be able to provide preventative maintenance information to partners like John so that these pumps are never down. There should never be a day without water. There should never be downtime. As part of the installation of the 14 pumps, John had the idea that he would involve the local communities in building the concrete base, which is what you see at the bottom here, as well as the fence. So the fence is designed to keep animals out from contaminating the well, from rubbing up against the pump. And there was a competition of the 14 communities that the community that did the best job, and this would be independently judged by a group of pastors, that they would get a special party and they would slaughter a goat and they would have a celebration. And so this turns out to be the community that won. And this is a guy from the community. This is also the community pump where Washington and his family get their water. And so it was really neat to see not only does the community benefit, but the hospital benefits, because Washington working at the hospital and doing amazing things, if he's not getting clean water in his family, then he's not able to serve at the hospital. And so it really is very important when we look at these facilities and thinking about the people who are local, who are working at the mission hospital, for instance. This pump is used about 2 to 3, 4 hours a day at the present. We went to another location. We only visited a few locations due to time in Zimbabwe. But this was a really interesting shot here, because not only does water provide life to the people, but it provides water and life to animals. And so having cows like this is a huge deal and benefits the communities tremendously. And when there's no water, there's no animals. And in fact, a lot of times animals die when there's drought. And just a small amount of runoff that occurs from the pump is able to water these animals, which is really critical for the communities. And sometimes you'll see they'll actually build like a little trough that collects the water even better than just on the ground. But just even a little bit of runoff from splashing out of the buckets can keep these animals alive. I always find it interesting as we're working on pumps and visiting and talking to community members, we get some interested kids and onlookers, and this little boy was kind of looking at us like, hey, what are you guys doing? What's up? And these kids that were also hanging out and watching us. And the thing about this, it really drives home for me, just looking at them and realizing that their lives are going to be changed forever because of pumps like this, because the life pump and to know that it's not going to break down and we're committed to serving these communities. It really is life-changing, and they don't even necessarily realize it, but they're going to realize it and talk about it generations from now. And so it's just really cool to see and put faces to the places that we're serving, and knowing that kids, these 3 kids here, their lives are going to be changed. And it's to the credit of our team, to our various partners, our financial partners, and just lots of prayer, because working in these places is not easy, and it's not easy to truly be sustainable. Back at the hospital, we also worked on looking at a few different medical device projects that we currently have underway. So besides the pumps, we work on the Life Pump Link, we have the Life Tap, the Auto Life Pump, the Life Latrine. These are all current projects under water and sanitation and hygiene. But we also are looking at items within the medical world that we can help move the needle. And you can see this is the maintenance shop here for the medical equipment. There's lots of broken equipment that is sitting around, and much of this is donated from countries like the United States, where it's been donated, but it's inappropriate in most cases. The power requirements are wrong. There aren't spare parts, there aren't consumables and replaceable parts for the equipment. And so they're always trying to cobble and trying to tinker and make things work. And a couple of those projects are what we call the oxygen concentrator, the humidifier bottle, and a wound vacuum pump. And looking at those and realizing if we could create solutions to the oxygen concentrator to make it last longer, it would surely save a lot of lives and produce much better outcomes. The wound vacuum pumps currently available are just too expensive for these hospitals to use. And so currently, even at the Karanda Mission Hospital, when we interviewed one of the surgeons, we talked to about 6 doctors that work there. One of the surgeons, and they're all missionary doctors, mentioned that they could probably use about 10 wound vacuum pumps at a time right now. And right now they don't have any wound vacuum pumps. Looking at some of the equipment, you can tell just the shape that things are in. So these are the hospital beds and I think the men's ward. And they're looking and asking if we could create even low-cost traction equipment for rehabilitation. And so there's just a land of endless needs, and we're excited as our medical device program is growing to apply our methodologies and appropriate technology development in areas outside of water. If I shift over, we flew to Malawi. Now, I'm still a little bitter about how we got to Malawi, because originally we were supposed to fly directly from Harare, Zimbabwe to Lilongwe, Malawi, which is a 1-hour flight. Instead, the airlines suddenly canceled our flight, and we were rerouted. And basically, it went from a 1-hour journey to a 2-day journey to be able to get to our destination. But nevertheless, we persevered. The Lord got us into Malawi, and we were greeted by our Africa field director. This is Dr. Beatrice Chisenga, and our land cruiser, which I hadn't seen in person yet. And it was just really great to see her and to see the office and the expansion that's going on. In fact, this is part of the office expansion, our new facility. So this is a walled compound with the office here that we started to retrofit out for our purposes, including storing the container, which acts as a very secure warehouse on the left here. And so part of that was unloading the container so that we can better organize it instead of shelves and inventory control system. And that was quite a process. We were able to include several local people to help us with that, which really made it possible. We also worked on installation of our new roof rack. So this is Hugo up on the Land Cruiser. The currently available roof racks are not designed to carry pipes and rods for pumps. So our engineering team last summer developed a new system that is expandable and contractible and is able to carry the pipes and rods very securely and safely. So this is the installation. We also went and visited the new guest house, and this will be the home where Hugo and Bree will stay when they move to Malawi middle of next year. Obviously, it's under construction still, but it should be done by the time they move. And this is about 15 minutes or so away from the office, and will act as a great hub for future teams who come and do projects and work on innovations with us. And so probably many of you will get to visit this house eventually at some point in the future. Back at the office, this is the back side of the office, and you can see the back side of the container there. And David Anderson's up on the stage here, which is the back patio. And we were setting up the sound equipment. So this was made possible by a special gift where this equipment is used in communities for gospel outreach and training as we work with local pastors, as we work with the health surveillance assistants in order to talk about proper sanitation, hygiene, COVID prevention. And so we were testing it out and got everything set up. It's run off by a generator that David helped do quite a bit of work and engineering behind that. And we started playing some Christmas music, some good third day Christmas music, and this just naturally gathers a crowd. And so it's really neat to see that and how this is going to help communities quite a bit. We're official because we have a sign out in the front, and this was part of our work of getting things set up. We see the transformation from the left, which is the way the container arrived. We had it packaged very neatly and very securely. Then it goes through customs, which sorts everything out and makes a mess. And then it got reorganized and put in the shelves and the bins and the inventory control system that you see on the right side. And so this is very organized and will be very helpful in the future. Besides the pumps, one of our current projects is what we call the Life Latrine. So Life Latrine is looking at making a pit liner. So when you dig a pit for a pit toilet, the pit has to be held up the sides or else they'll cave in. And in fact, very tragically, we learned about a week before we arrived in Malawi that a police officer was using a pit latrine and the pit floor collapsed and he was buried alive and died. And so this is a tragic case. And so the issue is that the pit liners that are currently used are usually bricks, and they're too expensive to replace when the pit fills up. So then people stop using the latrine. So we were asked by World Vision to look at, can we remove and reuse the liner system? And so this has been a project that we've been working quite a bit on the last several months. We met with several NGO missionary partners, including Water Mission. Here we're demonstrating the Life Tap. So this is the automatic shut-off leak-free valve that is used in pipe stands. We also looked at a lot of hands-free wash stations. And so this has become a very popular idea. And in fact, it's interesting. We saw a lot of very inappropriate technology because the only hands-free wash stands that were working were the ones that were at the demo at the office. Because when we ran into hands-free wash stations at border crossings and other places, they were always broken. And so it just once again points to the need for what Design Outreach does at our core, which is creating appropriate technologies that are sustainable. We had the opportunity to visit 2 communities and install light pumps. And this was part of our ongoing training of trainers program. And I was at this one personally for most of the day in Mtenje Village, which is just outside the Lilongwe on the peri-urban edge. And this is what it looks like driving into the community. The community was getting water from an open well, and you can see the water. It's very cloudy, very contaminated. There's a lot of cases of dysentery and diarrhea disease in this community. And so the government identified this as a place that really needed a hand pump. When the well wasn't working, people would get water from the river, and this is the river that's right next to the well. So this is not water that anybody should or would want to drink. As we were talking to a lot of community members, one in particular stands out. This lady's named Beatrice, and she's on the water committee for Mtenje Village. And she was telling us how people were getting sick and how they used to have a pump, but the pump kept getting vandalized and broken, and nobody was there to fix it, and they couldn't afford to fix it. So they just quit using it and went back to the well, the open well. So as we're working on setting things up, we're gathering quite a crowd. You can see this is just part of the crowd, a lot of kids. And you can see the pump stand that's installed in kind of the upper left corner there. So there was a pump that quit working about 2 years ago, and it hasn't been used since. And so the opportunity to put in a life pump that's much more durable and long lasting was perfect for this community. And as part of that preparation, there was a local pastor that joined us from this organization called African Enterprise, and they were able to share the gospel. And people's ears are just very tuned to hearing when you come and solve a real problem. They want to know why, and they're very tuned to that message that the pastor's bringing, which is the goal, and is just wonderful to see. We have Hugo continuing in our training of trainer program. We have a couple government workers here, they're health surveillance assistants. We have a couple local pump technicians, and then a well drilling partner who is getting a refresher course. As we're looking around and seeing lots of people watching and very excited anticipation, we talked to these 2 kids who both were recently hospitalized for dysentery, and just realizing the necessity of what we're doing and the importance and the urgency. It's not just oh, it'd be nice if they had water. It's literally life and death for so many people. And to know now, because of the life pump, these kids don't have to drink that river water anymore. And it got really dark when the pump was finally installed. This is about 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. But I wanted to show this short video of the celebration that you get to see when pumps are first installed. You can just see the pure joy as she's pumping, and kids are putting their cups in. So we went back a couple days later, wanting to check up and make sure everything is still looking good, even though we're looking at the monitor and realizing that the pumps are being used. And you can see a lot of buckets that were getting filled up with clear water that people didn't even realize could be that clear, which is just mind-boggling for somebody who lives in the United States like we do. But this is the village water committee chairman and his wife and son down below. And we gave them these cups just to show the comparison. It's such a stark contrast. And just to realize that people actually were using the water on the left. It's just mind-boggling. And we gave other kids these cups just for good pictures and really looking at it and thinking these kids' lives are going to be changed, and they don't even necessarily realize it, but it could have effects for generations. These kids may not survive if they just drank the water on the left. They would certainly probably not feel up to going to school and doing other things. And now there's really a hope in the future. And we have proof that these pumps are being used. So looking at the Life Pump Link data, just a couple days ago, I mean, they're being used between 7 to 13 hours a day. This is high use, and people are now benefiting from safe water to drink and cook with for the first time in their entire lives. I'm going to shift over to another community, and I had the opportunity of visiting this community, but it was a little bit after the pump was almost installed. Chikwangwala village. This is going towards the Zambia border. Very tragically, a couple days before our team arrived to install this pump, there was a child, a girl, who went down to this river and was very tragically attacked by a crocodile and killed. And in fact, they were having the funeral the day before the pump installation was to be done. This is just astounding to think in today's world that this is still happening, and yet this is still the life of millions of people. And just to think of my own kids who are 8 and 10, 8, 11, 4, and thinking I wouldn't send them even close to the edge of this river. And yet girls are going down there 6, 7, 8 years old, collecting water and with tragic results. And so you can imagine how much joy there was in this community. The partner who was helping to do the community development in this community, they had a big party, and there was a pastor sharing the gospel. They had dancing and celebration. There were hundreds of people just gathered and just pushing in to see what was going on, and just so excited. This is where we were putting in the pump. A lot of people were very curious. They wanted to see the water flowing for the first time. And in fact, this is a short video. Once again, it's getting a little bit dark. It gets very dark early there. But let me share this short video for when the water started flowing. And you can see that this pump is being used about 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day. Once again, proof and evidence that this is actually working. I'm going to shift over to Zambia. So we spent a couple days. We went across the border, which was always a challenge in crossing the border these days. But we had some really great meetings. In fact, we met with the Chapata City Council. This is the area where we're looking to set up a satellite office for design outreach. We met with some NGOs, including Living Water International, that's really interested in using life pumps. One of the really critical people in Zambia is this gentleman named Munga. Munga was a government official that we trained as part of our National Training of Trainers program last year. And he's been volunteering with us because he believes so much in life pump and knowing the impact that it's going to have in the country. And he's an excellent spokesperson and will be very hands-on and a big part of design outreach, Lord willing, in Zambia. But the other part is he had a great analogy, and this is something that came out in the city council meeting. He's comparing the life pump to Land Cruisers. Land Cruisers are the vehicles we use, and they're very durable, very heavy duty, but also very, very expensive compared to other vehicles. But he was saying it was well worth it because you don't want to have your vehicle breaking down when you're going out to a community. And so it's important that you have the proper vehicle, and it's important that you have the proper pump. We shouldn't have pumps that break down if we're not willing to have vehicles that won't break down. So it really resonated well with the city council members, and I think it's something that it's just changing the status quo and changing the paradigm. But it's so great to see Zambians who are saying that themselves, who see the difference, who want to be part of the solution in the future, and not just continuing the same status quo of things breaking and no solution in the horizon. So we're just super excited to be partnered with people like Munga, who really help move the needle in places like Zambia. I'm going to kind of end on a short story here. This has been a really neat thing that I had the opportunity of meeting this gentleman. So Samuel Banda is the guy on the right, and he paints. He's an artist, and he painted the picture on the left and some other paintings. We met him at a market. In fact, it was one of those just God moments where we're just getting out of the car, and he comes up, and there's always lots of people trying to sell things and vendors. And I was so impressed with him because he was so happy and joyful, and he had a big smile and just really a wonderful person and personality. And as we got to talk with him, realized that he even had the opportunity to visit the United States at one point. But this is kind of like the Paul Harvey moment of the story. When I go to the next slide here, you'll see why. Samuel doesn't have any hands. He paints these paintings with his mouth, using a brush in his mouth and with his feet. He had every reason in the world to be bitter, to give up, to beg, to expect something for nothing. And yet he's persevering and pushing forward and working hard. And it was just such an inspiration. Hugo was with me when we met him, and it was just such an inspiration. And in realizing, life is hard. There's difficulties. There's terrible things that happen that we can't explain. We don't know why, but it's the joy. And he's a believer. He loves Jesus, and just the joy that he had in his heart was contagious. And so he's somebody I want to get to know better. And we're talking about seeing if he could even paint some murals and things at our new office, and paintings about Life Pump, and just a wonderful reminder of what perseverance and the love of Christ can do in somebody's heart. So I ask you to pray with us. There's so much going on. Right now, our Malawi team is in Zambia doing COVID-19 outreach. And so pray for their safety. They are traveling to various communities and doing upgrades with the new handles. We're also looking at the COVID-19 outreach in Zimbabwe that's starting up very soon as well. Pray our Life in Malawi events kick off well early next year, and that our end of the year fundraising, that our financial partners, like many of you, that we would just be able to fulfill this vision that God's given us. And we've seen some just amazing things already, which has just been incredible how God has worked in people's hearts. And it allows us to do things with excellence without cutting corners. And that's one of our 4 core values, is excellence. We have a shipment of pumps going out to Zimbabwe and Malawi in January. And then lastly, Hugo and Bree, as they're making the move to Malawi, and just allow the smooth passage, there's a lot of details that still need to be worked out. So on behalf of our team, our travel team, and all of DEO, we thank you and wish you a Merry Christmas. And I'll end there, and I'll be happy to take some questions, I believe, that are being collected here, and go back to my video.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. We do have a few questions that have already come in. So the first one is from David, and he asks, how does a Life Pump compare in price to other common pumps that are prone to breakdowns?
Yeah, so the hardware itself is more expensive than a commonly used pump like the AfroDev or India Mark II. So it may be, and it depends on depth. If we compare apples to apples on depth, we might be looking at a couple $1,000s more for a Life Pump. But then the total cost of ownership over even a couple, 2 or 3 years is less. And so it's really a value proposition conversation of you don't get something for nothing, but it's like you pay me now or pay me later. And that's been kind of going back to the Land Cruiser analogy. You can buy a used car, and in a few years it's broken down and there's no parts, and there's nobody knows how to fix it. Or you can buy a Land Cruiser and it's still running. And that's a value that's really starting to resonate when it comes to community hardware like hand pumps. Cool. But that is one of our challenges, because it's more expensive up front. It really takes early adopters who see that vision, and we're starting to see a lot of traction. Just to give an example, World Vision Malawi just announced to us that they're reevaluating all 4,000 wells that they have in Malawi to see where Life Pumps are appropriate. And that could be a lot of pumps. And a big part of this is through the standardization. The national standard in Malawi for wells that are over 45 meters deep are to be used with Life Pumps, which is a really huge breakthrough and a huge help for these communities.
Great, thanks, Greg. All right, second question. And this one comes from Ted. What is the longest running Life Pump, and how many years or hours of usage?
Yeah, seven years. In fact, over 7 years now. So in November 2013, the community of Zalamondo in the Kasungu district of Malawi received the first permanent installation of Life Pump, and that pump is still running. It's never had a day without water, which I think is extremely important to know. Pumps in general are considered functional and doing extremely well if they're running 90% of the year, or even 80% of the year. But our pumps have been running 100% of the time. And so I think that that's been the transformation. We continue visiting Zalamondo. The transformation has just been unreal. And there's a lot of communities just like them.
Awesome. All right, we have some great questions coming in, so thank you, everyone. So this one comes from Chris, and he asks, how many existing wells are being used versus newly drilled wells, and who is doing the drilling?
There's a lot of broken pumps out there on existing wells that are being abandoned, and new wells are constantly being drilled. And this is actually a major problem in the country of Malawi, for instance. About 60%, only 60% of pumps are considered functional. And so looking at all of those, the other 40% were wells that were drilled by well-meaning donors and organizations drilling wells. The majority of those wells are actually good wells that could be retrofitted with a light pump. And so this is where, like, for instance, I mentioned World Vision, they're reevaluating the wells where they put in AfriDevs to see if they're good candidates for light pumps, because they're good wells, but the pump is just stretched beyond its design limit, the AfriDev. And so they can use an existing well without having to re-drill. But unfortunately, there's still the problem of a lot of organizations and donors like to, quote unquote, give water for the first time, and so they want to drill a new well. So drilling could be $5,000 or $10,000 in cost, and then you have the hardware on top of that. But it makes a lot more sense from an economic standpoint, and from even just representing Christ in the proper way, to go back to communities that have broken pumps and making sure they still have water. And so we designed the light pumps so that they can be easily retrofittable on existing wells. We think the country of Malawi, for instance, has a need of at least 3,000 light pumps, just based on depth. And that's not even based on reliability. Just based on the depth of the aquifers in Malawi, the little country of Malawi. And I think Zambia probably needs 5,000 light pumps. And those are just in those two countries.
Thanks, Greg. Sarah writes, I'm curious to hear more about the vandalism the previous pumps in Malawi had experienced. Were the other pumps susceptible to breakage, and were the vandals part of the impacted village?
Yeah, vandalism is a really big problem, and you read a lot of articles about this and hear a lot of stories. So one of the issues, and this is going back to the philosophy of village level operations and maintenance. So one of the issues with the AfriDev pump or the India Mark II pump is that they're relatively easy for the community to do certain types of maintenance. Which means that people can pull the rods out relatively easy and replace the seals at the bottom. The problem is that the rods are relatively easy to pull out, and vandals will come in the middle of the night, steal the rods, and sell it for scrap, like rebar for concrete, or they'll take them and cut them and make like window grates for homes, like weld them together and stuff. So a lot of times the vandalism, it's not just somebody going and just breaking it. You know, I think in America, we think of vandalism like somebody spray painted a building just to, deface it. But vandalism is really theft in most cases, where people are coming and stealing parts because there's some value to it, even a small value, and they're reselling it on the black market. And so, that was one of the things we worked very hard on Light Pump. There's a fine line between making something tamper-proof and tamper-resistant, and making it too difficult to work on. And so that's one of the things that we studied very, very closely on Light Pump, so that you would need lifting equipment to pull the pump out of the ground, but also because the Light Pump doesn't rely on seals or O-rings like these other piston pumps do, it's years between any time the pump actually needs to be pulled out of the ground. So we've only seen, in my whole experience, I've only seen one light pump vandalized, and that was because, and it wasn't a vandalism, it was really I think somebody was just curious about what was inside the gearbox, and they had a wrench and they took off the side plate, and that was the only time I've ever seen that. But it takes somebody very determined to want to get into a light pump, whereas it's much easier for somebody to take parts off of the other pumps.
Great, thanks, Greg. We probably have time for maybe one or two more questions. Cody asked, how helpful is objective pump data in conversations with government officials?
Yeah, I think that the pump data really is really interesting to them. They don't yet know how to use it, but it's very interesting to them because they're able to look at certain areas and know where to send resources. And I think as the software and as the what we call like machine learning develops, if we can show that using the data to do preventative maintenance and setting up a water utility program. So in other words, the community doesn't wait until the pump breaks before something happens, but if somebody's dispatched ahead of time and they're collecting a small fee from the community, so the community has ownership and the pump is running 100% of the time, that's what the government really cares about. They really care that these communities have long-lasting water. And that's something that we're working towards with Sunset Solutions and our own team and some other partners, E2 Infosystem, to figure out how do those algorithms look? How do we combine the hardware with the software with the machine learning? Right now, I think it's just really a curiosity. They look at it and I think they're really amazed that some of these areas get so much use. And it also points to, if you have an area that's the pump's being used 15, 20 hours a day, to be honest, that sounds really impressive when you're talking to a donor, but it's really an indication that another pump is needed. You know, it really probably means that water is being rationed and people are there in the nighttime when there's hyenas and wild dogs and snakes and all sorts of things that can hurt people. So pumps shouldn't be used after dark simply because of the safety issues. And so what this does, it really shows that, hey, you need more pumps in a certain area because there's a higher population density than maybe somebody originally thought.
Cool, thank you, Greg. We'll take one more question from Fabio. Has it been considered to use wind power systems with the pumps to keep water flowing and store it?
I've not seen hardly any wind power. I think the issue is the consistency of the wind, and then the mechanical sort of durability of the system. But I've really never seen wind power effectively used, and that's I think because of just the availability of parts. The communities have so little. Using manual power is not a problem. What people really want is an extremely reliable system. And the ease of use is very, very secondary to that. If you were to ask somebody, do you want to pump with your hands or do you want to turn on a spigot? They would always say a spigot because that's just easier. But if you say, but the spigot is going to be intermittent and it may not turn on sometimes and the water may not come out, which would you rather have? They would always pick the manual option. They would always pick the hand pump option. And I think it's because, the more complicated a system, the more likely components will break. The more likely something will break and it'll quit working. So that's really kind of our philosophy. But the idea with like our auto life pump program is that as communities develop and as the populations grow, the auto life pump is taking an existing pump and motorizing it. And this is something that we're going to be piloting in Malawi, Lord willing, next year, which really helps solve the problem. There's lots of sun, and it'll increase the flow rate by about 3 or 4 times, but also have a manual backup. And when we talk to NGOs and government officials about that, they're very excited because it's really a progression. It's a progression towards eventually running water in somebody's home, which in these communities, we're probably 30, 40, 50 years away from realizing that. Right now, it's a matter of having reliable water every day, and that really moves the needle. But yeah, I mean, we see all sorts of solar installations, but just not very many wind power for whatever reason.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg and Abe. And we really want to thank everyone for your wonderful questions and participation. Really is fantastic. As always, you want to extend an invitation. You can reach out to Greg, Abe, Hugo, anyone who went on the trip if you have additional questions. And we just hope that everyone has a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So thank you again. And yeah, God bless everyone. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.